Hello all, welcome to this series lecture of operating system. So in today's lecture we will be going through a new topic which is called system call. So let's get started with system call. So there are various types of system call that we have in our course. So all those system calls are like process control, file management, device management, information management and communication. So all the system call we will be like going through one by one in details, and we will get the basic idea of what exactly is a system call. So without any further delay, let's start. So system call. So first let us try to understand what exactly is a system call. Okay, so if we try to remember from the previous class that we have discussed the basic definition of operating system. So the basic definition is it acts as an interface between the user and the hardware. Fine. So operating system is basically acts as an interface between the user and the hardware. So the operating system is going to have certain specific software, or we can say certain specific services. With that, it will be helping the user to perform certain tasks, and the use like in those tasks the user may require some hardware devices as well. Fine. Now the point is, while developing the operating system, there we require like as it acts as an interface, so it requires certain specific commands or certain specific we can say word through which it is going to do certain activities. So all those specific commands are actually categorized into multiple categories as we have discussed. So all those categories are basically called your different system calls. So system call provides an interface between the user program and the operating system. Fine. So what we have, like if any user want to execute anything, any program, so it is an user program. Okay. And in with respect to the user program, the operate like the user may require hardware or may not require hardware, but it will definitely use certain resources. Fine. So who is actually maintaining or managing those resources? The operating system is actually maintaining and managing those resources. Now these user program definitely require help from the operating system. Otherwise what is the use of the operating system? So when we are running, or when a user is actually executing a program, it requires the help of the operating system. So system call is the actual thing that is actually placed in between the user program and the operating system. So in the basic definition of operating system, what we have studied, that between user and the between user and the hardware, we have an interface called an operating system. But the system call is with which actually that sort of things are actually happening. Fine. So it is basically an interface between the user program. User is writing user program, user is executing the user program, and the user program and the operating system. What sort of communication or what sort of management is actually taking place? Those things are actually taken care by the system call. Okay. So just we need to remember, it's an interface between the user program and the operating system. The second point is that it is a programmatic way by which user requests a service from the kernel of the operating system. Fine. So it is basically a programmatic way that through some programmatic approach, the user program is going to request some services that we have studied in the last lecture, that uh, there are certain services in the operating system. So through this system call, those services are actually getting requested by the user program, and those services are requested from the kernel of the operating system. So what exactly is a kernel? So the kernel thing I will explain in the next video, but just for this particular video we will try to understand when a program is getting executed, so how the kernel is actually related. Then when a program is need and like when a program needs certain resources, it need to make a call to the kernel. So when any program is required, it actually requests the kernel. Okay, so how that request, actually all those things are actually taken care by the kernel itself. Okay, so how the request is being made, let's see. When we are actually running the user program, okay, so it will be running in two mode. The first mode is user mode, and the second mode is kernel mode. Kernel mode. Now let's try to understand about this user mode and kernel mode. Okay, when any user program just need some calculation, or it's basically related to the program or software sort of thing, then the program will run in the user mode. Fine. But when a program or user program requires certain specific hardware resources for its execution of the task, in that case the user program need to be shifted to the kernel mode. Okay, that is the main difference. So when any sort of calculation or any sort of software related or program related things are the user program is related with, it is working or it is running in the user mode. And when any hardware resources, specifically like we certain requires IO hardwares, IO devices, then memory memory. Okay, so in those cases we require the user program need to shift to the kernel mode. Why this is shifting actually take place? The user doesn't have the access, or in the operating system the users are not given access directly to use those hardware for the security aspect. Fine. So if the security is there and if operating system is not allowing the user program to use the hardware directly, so there should be certain mediator present. So that mediator is basically the kernel mode. So when any user program requires the hardware, okay, it will be executed in the kernel mode, okay, used in the kernel mode, and then only it can access the hardware. And who is helping in that? The operating system is actually helping in that to shift the process from user mode to the kernel mode. And once the operating system user program has executed, that means it has used those physical devices, hardware devices. Once its uses has been done, okay, then once again it will shift to the user mode. Okay, it doesn't mean that if a program has shifted to the kernel mode, it will always run in the kernel mode. No, it will not work in that way. The once the execution is completed in kernel mode, it will move back to the user mode. Okay, so this is about user mode and kernel mode. And the last thing, when any such program requires any hardware resources, it requests operating system to use all those and are made through system call. So that is the basic very explanatory definition of the system call, that when a program requires any hardware resources, okay, so the OS, it requests OS. So user program will request OS, and OS is actually giving certain command to use, or the operating system will be actually using all those resources, and they are made through the system call. So that is basically the system call we have. Now we will go through the categories or the variety of system call that we have. So the first and the foremost one is process control. So process is generally the basic building block of the operating system. Like if we have the operating system and user program want to execute anything, so they will be executing all those programs in the form of process. So process control is one of the important aspect in operating system. Okay, so this system calls like the process control system call are basically dealing with the process related aspect. Okay, so if any process is there, so if you want to end the process, or you can abort the process, or you can, like, by creating, you can create the process, then you can terminate the process, then that process can, you can load that particular process in the main memory, you can execute that particular process. So all these events are actually, or all these calls are actually available with respect to the process. There are other system calls are also available with process related thing. For example, in some cases that we will actually learn all those aspects in the later on lecture, that uh, process sometime need to wait for any particular resource or for any particular event to occur. So in that case we have to wait. So process will be given instruction, or process will be instructed to wait for certain time. So wait event is there, then signed event is there, then uh, like when the process is actually executed, so the memory, because that particular process is actually getting loaded in the main memory, and when the process execution is completed, so that process need to be removed from the main memory. So allocation and deallocation or free up of the memory is actually taking place. So all those calls, all those commands, the operating system is actually like giving the actual computer system with the help of system call. So this is about process control system call. Next one we have file management. So as we know, like before the database has came into existence, we were using file to store the data in the system. And with respect to the operating system, like we are maintaining a lot of file. Fine, because one if we are installing any operating system, so all those information, user related data, system related data, everything are actually getting stored in the form of files only. Okay, so there should be certain mechanism in order to manage those files, or in order to manipulate or handle those files. Okay, so operating system, there are certain specific call through which all those file management is actually taken place. Okay, so here in this case we are actually talking about the command, or the thing, the line that we are going to use in the command. Okay, so those things we are actually discuss, that those are the actual system call when the operating system is actually making. Okay, so the file related system calls that can have, like, we can create file, we can delete file, we can open file, we can close file, then read, write, and reposition, we can do all those things with respect to the file. Then what about getting the attributes of the file, then setting up attributes of the file. So all these things can be done through the file management system call. Next one is device management. The operating systems are actually integrated with a lot of devices, the input output devices like printer, monitor, keyboard, mouse, lot of different things. So in order to manage all those devices, okay, and apart from that we have the basic devices like main memory, disk drives, input output devices we have discussed, then access to file. So management of device is another aspect of the operating system. Okay, and it is one of the services also. So with what command those devices are actually getting managed. Okay, so those commands are actually coming under the category of device management system call. So if these resources are free, okay, so any resource, any device, so suppose any process request any particular hardware device or hardware resource to complete its execution. But in that case, in the situation, if the device is free, so definitely the process will be getting allocated. But if the system is using that device for any other process, okay, so the process which is currently requesting need to wait for certain time. Okay, once the resource is free or resource is empty, then the process will be allocated to that particular resource. So all this management of the resource with respect to your hardware thing device is actually taken care by the device management system call. So these system calls are like, you can request device, you can release device, read, write, reposition, then you can get attribute, or it, like in other words, get device attribute, then set device attribute we can do. Then sometimes we logically attach or detach drive, like pen drive we are inserting for the first for the first time, and while ejecting it we are ejecting it logically, right? So all those things, logically attach or detach things, will take place. Okay, so this is about device management. Next one is information management. So system calls, while we are handling the system call, uh, we may have certain cases where we need to handle those information, that is actually taking those informations are actually getting transferred between the user program and the operating system. Okay, so there are certain specific system call which actually deals with the information of the operating system or information about the environment. Okay, so one of the basic example of this information management system call is that what exactly is happening in information management, that user required certain information related to the system or maybe related to something. So how those informations are actually getting used by the user program, and what are the system calls we have. Okay, the basic example I was trying to give is system date. Okay, so every operating system, it is coming with one certain command, sysdate. So if you type that sysdate in the command line or command prompt or wherever, okay, terminal, you will, like after executing or after running that command sysdate, you will be getting the system date, what is the current date and time. Okay, so that is one example. Similarly, we have the logs of all activities that are actually taken place in the system, like I'm opening a text file, I'm opening YouTube, then which video I'm watching. So all those things are actually getting logged in the system. So if anybody wants to have a look in the log, so there will be some specific system call available. Okay, so it is up to the operating system at how many system calls they are provided in each category, and what are, like, we have to know how exactly the system calls are actually getting used. Okay, so with respect to your information management, we have get date and time, then we can set date and time, then we can get system data, we can set system data, we can get or set process or file or device attribute. So all these things we can do in the information management. The next one is communication. So it is like, the if we go to the previous one, like information management and configuration, it will like create some confusion. But in communication, it is basically the communication between the processes. Okay, so systems are useful, these system calls are like very basically useful for inter-process communication. Okay, so there may be two process, P1 then P2. So between this process there will be some sort of communication that may take place. So all those communication thing are actually taken care by the this communication system call. Okay, but basically this in the inter-process communication, we basically have two type. The first one is this message passing, and the second one is shared memory. So in the message passing category, so exchange of messages between two programs, between suppose P1 and P2 is actually taken place. Okay, so P1 will send some message, okay, to P2. It may work like that. Okay, and in other word, P2 can revert or send some message to P1. So sending of or exchanging of message actually taken place, message between the processes. The other way is that shared memory. So in the shared memory, what happens, there will be having a shared space. Okay, and we will have the process. So P1 will store certain information in the shared memory, and P2 can also access that area for information retrieval. So that is how they are actually managing or sharing the information among each other. Okay, so the commands or the system calls that we can use in terms of communication, that in the inter-process communication, basically in the message passing thing, that we can create or delete the connection, then send and receive the message, then transfer the status information, attach and detach remote devices. So all those system calls are actually related to the communication aspect. So this is all about the system call. I hope you people have understood this concept. So thank you.